The widely known problem in today's society we face is fake and one-sided news. Oftentimes in today's day and age, we see people comprehending and following fake, one-sided, or opinionated news. The root of this problem often lies in the way people get their news. We see people getting their news or information from merely one news source, or following a source which is widely known to present opinions rather than facts. When one relies on these and only these sources for information, it results in an uninformed decision or a lack of understanding of the material, impacting not just them, but society holistically.
Now introducing our solution, the responsible media application created with the intention of eliminating bias from the news and diversifying one's newsfeed by challenging the user with new viewpoints. So what does our mobile application do? It analyzes the user's preference and provides them with articles of various perspectives.
Before we begin talking about the technical aspects of our build, we'll dive into the architecture of our design. After the user is prompted to log in, Firebase authenticates the user to be able to collect user preferences and send back user data to our mobile application. Once in our mobile application, we make an API request to a Heroku server that we set up that collects user preferences. In our server, we then make an API call to News API web app that returns top trending news articles back to our server. Back in our server, we process both user preferences and articles sent from the News API to be filtered through our recommender system to return recommended articles back to the mobile application.
Moving into the client side and UI and UX design. In our application, you will be first greeted with a page to log in that will allow the user to access their account. You will also have the option to create an account by providing your name, email, age, and political preference. Once you have logged into your account, you will be given a list of 5 articles that you can choose from. Upon completing the article, you'll be prompted to like or dislike it. For our layout, we currently have a list of 5 articles with an embedded web view. This will allow the user to know briefly about the article content. Once they have selected an article, it will open in a web browser. As for our login section, we collect minimal data, allowing the user to easily log in or create an account.
So for the backend of our mobile application, we want to optimize the user's experience while allowing easy integration for us with Android mobile applications. So we decided to go with Google Cloud Platform since Google has also developed Android, so it provide a seamless integration from our backend to our frontend or client side. We first off used Firebase authentication for the login and sign up portions of our mobile application. So we call Firebase authentication whenever a user signs up or logs in, and essentially what Firebase authentication does for us is it stores the emails, passwords, and the unique identification uh, codes to allow us to cross-check the users essentially. And as of right now, we only have one sign-in method, which is email and password. We also allow the user to reset their password through a link we send in the email, which is also powered through Firebase authentication. Then we have Firestore, which is our NoSQL database. And the reason we chose NoSQL is because every user's data will be different and the format will also change dynamically based on that since there are different sources and topics they've read, liked, or disliked. And virtually every user will have a different uh, information or data from that. So the document ID for our users is stored with the user's email to ensure no redundancy is there since we don't want to have duplicate accounts or information stored in our database. It is also easy to cross-check for an error since the document ID would automatically throw an error which we can catch in our code. In Firestore, we store all of the user's information, which is called on sign up, and on login, we retrieve it from Firestore. So almost everything is stored in Firestore except for their password since we want to keep that secure, and Firebase authentication does that for us. So in our Firestore, we store all of these values such as name, email, age, political affiliation, and how they have reacted to certain articles, and we parse that data so that we can read it easily for our machine learning algorithm. The reactions to the articles are stored in a map so that the key is the source or topic's name, and then the value is how many times that event has occurred. So as you can see here, there's a lot of data, but if you look at the sources disliked, the key is CNN and the value is 1. That means the user has disliked CNN once. On the other hand, if you go to sources read, and the first one is CNBC. So the user has read CNBC 3 times.
Now let's dive into a web application. The setup was done using Flask to provide a web framework for our server. Using PySparks to write our code for our server, we then deploy it using git bash to commit to Heroku. Once deployed, we get a web address for our server, as you can see in this slide. If you go to that web address, it's currently configured to return 5 articles, the top 5 articles from the news API. We have it set up this way so that at least for the first iteration, the user is able to get 5 articles, because at that point we don't have any data collected from the user. Once we collect user preferences, we use another get method set up from this example below, and we collect PA, which would stand for political affiliation. So we have like a score of 0.8 likes of the sources, and also likes of the topics that the user currently likes. Then using this data and all the news sources that we collected from News API, we process both of these data, and inside our server, we run our machine learning algorithm. Lastly, as you can see, we see what the output is when we call our server using the web address given above, using these 2 web addresses. So we get back in JSON format the news sources that are given to us, both by recommendations and just initially. And then in that is the URL, which is used by our mobile application to send the user to that news source, the description so that they can see what they might prefer reading, and then source name and topics so we can collect more information on users. And then Postman is a good source to test like test our APIs and see what our output is from them. Lastly, we're going to talk about our recommender system. So the libraries we use to process our data and for our machine learning algorithm is we use a pandas library, which helps us organize our data, NLTK, which creates a stop words dictionary, which basically is used to remove words that are common, like a, but, the, and, to filter our keywords in the content of the news sources. And then scikit-learn vectorizes our data so that we can find similarities and use functions within it. So specifically, again, referring to the recommender system, we're using a context-based recommender system. So what that is that it compares item to item. So it finds similarities in items and recommends us the most similar item to another item. And as for the cosine similarity, it returns back similar items irregardless of the length of or the size of the vector. So it's able to detect similarities in words or keywords. And so this is like an example of us running that part. Lastly, we cross-reference suggested articles from our organization with our user data and political leanings or political affiliation based on news sources to create a better recommendation.
Important lessons learned from this virtual internship was the importance of communicating clearly and effectively with my team members to ensure that we understood the tasks that we were assigned. Aside from gaining experience in a completely virtual collaboration, I also learned a lot about integrating the front end and back end of our application. I was also able to garner knowledge about machine learning and authentication from materials provided by our mentor.
I learned a lot. I had the opportunity to kind of direct and lead the team, so I learned on a lot of that. I learned that, especially when it comes to coding, there's a lot of planning that's done before you even go into the coding, and that helps create a better flow when working with each other. Also, in the organization aspects, we use Git, so I learned a lot of Git conventions, which was really helpful.
So I got to learn a lot through this internship and specifically Responsible Media app in terms of the project structure as well as the technical level of it. So the first thing I got to learn was agile meeting techniques such as Scrum, sprints, Scrum Masters, and all of how the process works in the industry and learning how to kind of adjust to it. Then I learned about secure authentication practices since we were using Firebase authentication, and our mentor Sam had a lot of expertise in that area. So he gave us a workshop in terms of authentication, secure practices, how you should be doing it, and so I got to learn a lot from that. Then I also learned a lot about Git conventions, such as how to make pull requests, how to name them, creating issues, merging pull requests, merging branches, deleting branches after your work is done with the branch, and all of those conventions and techniques. Then I also learned a lot with the Android and Google Cloud integration, realizing it's honestly really simple to integrate both of them. And I learned how to integrate specific Google Cloud services such as authentication, database, and I even looked into natural language processing by Google and how we could integrate that into our mobile app. Then I learned machine learning and I was quite new to it, so I gained a lot of exposure into machine learning from it and I got a high level understanding of how it worked. Finally, I learned a lot about API calls and how web servers work and how you can retrieve data from an API and then parse the data you get. And we use JSON specifically, but any kind of data and then use the data wherever and however you want it. So if I got a chance to continue on this project and further this idea, there are there are a few things I would like to focus on. First of all, I'd like to enhance the API performance and speed since as of right now, there's quite a delay in how we get the data and then we parse it and then we display it in the buttons. And then additionally, I would want to centralize all the server side onto Google Cloud Platform so we can have one backend that includes everything, which so we can easily maintain it and incorporate everything within that. After that, I'd want to possibly transform into serverless procedures. So I would want to go from server-side API calls, all of that, to serverless architecture so that we could call it without actually having overhead costs in the long run or just learning more about the serverless side of it. And finally, I'd want to improve the machine learning model and algorithm to enhance our suggestions, recommendations, and get a better learning of what the user likes and dislikes.
Thanks to Code Lab, all the volunteers, and the guest speakers. This has been an incredible opportunity. We got to learn lots. We also want to give out a special thanks to our mentor, Samba Castro. We couldn't have done this without him and his guidance. So lastly, we leave you with our contact information. Please feel free to reach out to us, ask us questions, and we can direct you in any way that we can. Thank you once again.